Hi everyone, welcome to the Car Chat podcast. And with me today, I have Christian von Koenigsegg. Hello.
Yeah. Hi, everyone.
Hi Christian. Can you tell the audience a little bit about just sort of who you are and what you do?
Well, I guess the short answer is I develop and produce cars in the company I created together with my colleagues. I am 48 years old. I started this company back in 1994 when I was 22 years old. And this is basically what I've been doing for my grown up life, developing, testing, producing, delivering extreme Swedish sports cars to the world market.
I think extreme is a very good way of describing them. I've followed you and the cars for a long time. And Geneva this year, even though it was sort of not Geneva, but was Geneva, with the unveiling of one of your new cars, the Gemera, I think for a lot of people, and definitely myself, it was like, oh, wow, this is something completely different to what's out there and just a whole different take. Can we talk a bit about the Gemera and what inspired it? And
so the Gemera is kind of a dream of mine since 15 years back, like 10 years into developing sports cars. I got married, I had a family, kids, saying, it's very limited only being two persons in a car. Of course, the McLaren F1 existed already then, and they have three persons. It's a little bit better. But there you are very kind of egocentrically placed as a driver by yourself, and you have two slightly rearward passengers. So if you're only two in the car, it's not so social from the driver to the passenger to communicate. And it's quite cumbersome getting in and out. So it's like if you have more people in the car, maybe you're looking for something a bit more practical as well. So I started thinking, why not try to keep all the aspects of a mid-engine hypercar, mega car, but giving the experience to four people. So if you're only two persons in the car, you still maintain that kind of easy ingress, egress, and communication possibility with your fellow passenger. But then there is space for two more that again have their own kind of a space to communicate and hang out in. And but it's not supposed to be like a backseat experience. You have the same kind of seats as up in the front and same kind of space. You're not tucked in the back. It's like full space also in the rear with full amenities. And also like the whole idea of having two doors, which is kind of a much more sportier feel than a four-door car, and it's kind of more minimalistic and potentially more lightweight and so on. But having that two-door experience, but being able to go in and out of the rear seats uncompromised compared to the front seats. So you don't need to fold or move the front seat. You can get straight in and out from the front and the rear simultaneously through only two doors and with no B-pillar. Kind of the idea is that if you drive up to a red carpet event with a Gemera, maybe the star exits from the rear, not necessarily from the front of the car. It's not like a GT where you're like, you can join for a ride, but you will be miserable back there. You know, it's a full-on space in a mid-engine mega car, trying to avoid compromise, even though we have two more seats.
Was two doors the thing from the outset?
Yes, very much. And not only two doors. I mean, we have these unique Koenigsegg Synchro Helix door mechanisms and which swings out and moves forward. And those doors cater themselves very well to being long, because if you have a normal door hinge and if you have a long door and you're parked parallel to another car, you can't get out. But with our hinge mechanism, the length has no bearing. It doesn't matter. It just goes up and forward, so it clears the whole side of the car. So it really puts another spin on our existing door solution and mechanism, making it even more practical than it was.
Yeah, that problem of like even you just get in a normal like coupe that has a long door, you just can't get out of them in loads of spaces.
That's it. So here you can park very close to another car. I mean, as close as you can that you need to get out, and the whole door is just gone. Front and rear. So it's even more practical than also having rear doors that you would kind of slam into the door, the car next to you. Here, the side of the car is just gone.
And your doors have sensors all the way around, don't they?
Yeah. So there is a ultrasonic sensor aimed outwards to check before opening for like trees or lampposts or a super high curb. Now the doors are actually also moving upwards, so curbs is not really a big problem unless you have these mega American like storm drain curves that can be super high, but then it would stop. And then we have a sensor at the back of the door, so if it would get close to something in the roof or something, it would stop before it's not vertical or 90 degrees. You can still get out. And we've checked that 90% of the world's garage roofs are higher than we need. So most of the time you can open fully.
No problem. It's pretty cool. And then obviously a huge part of all these cars is the powertrain and delivering crazy performance. There's a lot of new stuff in this car.
Yeah, I mean, the Gemera has maybe the most new, never before seen combination of technologies of any car I can think of. So first of all, I mean, it has a very advanced electrical powertrain. And if we would just put in a bigger battery pack, that would be all you need. I mean, it's a 1,200 horsepower electrical powertrain, rear wheel, separate motors, torque vectoring, front wheel, torque vectoring through one electrical motor with an open differential and clutches. But in order to save weight and gain emotion, we have developed a super compact, super efficient, super powerful little engine, combustion engine, that can run on renewable fuels. It's a flex fuel engine where we have incorporated our Freevalve technology. So we don't have any camshafts. So we can run the engine leaner, with more torque, with more power and a cleaner startup and on any renewable fuel. And as this engine has 600 horsepower and 600 newton meters of torque, and we use it for propelling the car mechanically directly through our direct drive system, but also to charge the battery. We can have a battery pack that weighs 160, 170 kilos instead of 500-600 kilos, and the engine only weighs 70 kilos. And if you add fuel tank, exhaust system, so on, maybe 100. But it's several hundred kilos of weight saving compared to a pure BEV, and you get a roar. And if you run on renewable fuels and maybe solar power for your plug-in part, then you're as environmentally and CO2 benign as a pure electric car, and you carry around much less weight, which over time also is a benefit for the environment, and you get a roar. So what we say, I mean, it's more complicated than making just a combustion engine car or just a BEV, because it's a mix of the two. But you add lightness compared to one or the other, and also emotion and performance. It's sportier. I mean, if you can save 300-400 kilos, it's just a better car around the track and performance wise.
Around all of the things. Yeah, it was going to be one of my questions.
So basically, the short answer is you add lightness through complexity.
Yeah, I like that. Because conventional hybrids of like the normal roadie cars we see all the time, they generally, the weight penalty for doing the process is just so severe that they're actually not really any more efficient.
No, I think the standard type of hybrids are pretty nasty. Basically, you have a full BEV platform, but a small electrical motor and a small battery, but you have all those components. And then you have a full-on combustion engine platform with gearboxes and this and that. And then you get a fairly efficient solution, but heavy and complex. Or you have the more simple solution. So the first one is a parallel hybrid, and then you have the series hybrid where you just put a combustion engine in as a generator. And then you have very poor efficiency, because you convert mechanical energy into electricity, into mechanical energy, and again to the road. So you have a lot of conversions going on. So a little bit more simple, but not so efficient, and very unemotional, because you just have this busting engine that is disconnected from what you're doing. So with our direct drive system, we kind of overcome those two drawbacks in the sense we don't have a complex gearbox and so on like the parallel hybrid. Instead, we manage to drive the combustion engine directly to the wheels with no transmission, and saving transmission losses and weight and complexity. And when you're cruising on the highway, you can run purely a combustion engine with no transmission losses. And as we are connected to the ground, from the crank to the ground, you also have that sense that when you push the throttle, the car moves harder. When the engine roars, the car moves harder, and when you lift off, the engine roars less. So we have that kind of emotional connection that the RPM and stress of the combustion engine is connected to your experience, which you wouldn't have if you have a series hybrid. It would just be buzzing along regardless of what you're doing, which is very annoying for a sports car. So I think the traditional hybrids are very compromised and kind of nasty, while our direct drive hybrid, through added complexity, saves weight compared to a BEV and makes it much more environmentally conscious than just a pure combustion engine, as we can regenerate electricity from braking, and as we can have a smaller engine and torque field from the electrical propulsion systems, and we can have a much smaller battery than a pure BEV.
No, it sounds like a great solution that still has come out as reasonably light in comparison. Like any of these things like this from anyone else is so much heavier.
Yeah. So what we say, Koenigsegg is kind of a company. We're propulsion agnostic.
Yeah.
Whatever makes sense. So in an expensive sports car, I would say it makes sense to have a little bit more complication if you can save weight and get more performance. And in a sports car compared to a normal car, I think an engine sound, at least if it sounds good, is a plus. If you take your average commuter car, especially if it's a diesel or something like that, you would rather have no sound. Or let's say a Mercedes S-Class, just wafting along. I mean, they're very quiet. Or a Rolls-Royce, you don't really looking for a sound. But in a sports car, I think still today, a little bit of a roar is something that adds to the experience.
Yeah, definitely. So you've got, because of that, the petrol part of it, or the E85 part of it, is connected directly to your wheel. So do you only have one gear?
Yes. It kind of no gears. It's the final drive. So you have one gear ratio. It's like a 3.5 to 1 or something like that. So it's a bevel gear just to come from the crankshaft out to the differential, basically. And in between, we have a torque converter with a lockup, because otherwise we could not idle the engine when you're standing still. And the torque converter, of course, helps to compensate to build torque at lower speeds, and the engine can rev up a little bit. And then when you get up to your cruising speed or slightly under, we lock up, and then we're in direct drive. But if you again floor it, as long as you're not in a very high speed, we open up the torque converter to help torque convert again. And when you lift off and only accelerate with 50% acceleration or less, we're still in lockup, because then we don't need the help of the torque converter. So the efficiency is really high when you're in lockup. It's a little bit less optimal when you're in torque conversion, but that is so momentarily. It's like a few seconds per journey. It's kind of irrelevant in a sense.
And does the engine rev up at all in that middle bit of a process?
It does. So we even have paddles, so you can pre-release. It's not, in a way, it's like a kick down or a downshift if you push the throttle, but you can even open and close it with a paddle. So if you open it up, the engine revs up like you're shifting down.
Okay.
And when you floor it, it goes up even higher, and then it moves with your speed change. So it's interesting. It feels like you have like 20 or 30 gears in the car that are connected. You're shifting with your throttle foot. So if you're at like 30% throttle, if you're in non-lockup mode, if you're locked up, it's tied to the speed, the RPM. Yeah. But if you open the torque converter, if you're like 30% throttle, it might jump up to, let's say, 3,000 RPM. And then you hold it, and then it goes with the speed like you're locked in gear. Okay. And then if you floor a little bit more, it jumps up another 500. But then you're again locked in. And then if you back off, you go down. So it's like instant shifting with moving of your throttle foot.
Yeah.
But as soon as you hold your foot, you're locked into a kind of virtual gear. So it's very natural and very, very, exciting experience. And it's the opposite to, a CVT transmission, where if you floor it, it goes up to 4,000 or 5,000. Yeah. And it stays there from maybe 20 miles per hour to 80 miles per hour, and it feels really rubber bandy and nasty. Here it's always kind of connected to your experience and speed change depending on your foot angle.
No, that sounds really quite interesting and a completely different, because I sort of had this idea that it was just going to be connected to speed, and it's just one note that changes depending.
In lockup, yes, but when you're open from lockup and you torque convert, it becomes like a 20-speed gearbox controlled by your right foot.
Yeah, and the Freevalve technology. Is this is the first car you've used that in?
Yeah. Yeah, it's the first Koenigsegg, absolutely. We've over the years we've done some test cars, some old Saabs and some other cars. I've worked with some Asian car manufacturers, truck manufacturers, and so on, and some other sports car manufacturers. And some of those projects are still ongoing. Of course, we're going into an electrified world, so to develop the combustion engine to the next level is not on everyone's chart maybe or priority, but as I said before, we kind of are powertrain agnostic, so if we can see an interesting mix and make it work and have benefits from that, that's what we do, and this is the first Koenigsegg that has it. And basically what it does is you can control each valve in the engine, each poppet valve, individually from each other, even inside one cylinder. So you can open one intake valve instead of both at lower RPM to have double the speed and turbulence compared to opening both. You need two valves in a 4-valve cylinder for maximum performance and high RPM, but actually at low RPM you would rather just open one, and you don't even want to open it so much. You want turbulence to spin around the air-fuel mixture as much as possible. So opening one a little bit is much more beneficial than two and a high lift and a long lift, long duration. So that it enables us to really optimize valve timing, choose how many valves we operate, how many cylinders we open the valves, because we can cylinder deactivate. And for example, we can remove the throttle body from the combustion engine because we basically throttle with the valves.
Right.
So if you know racing engines, if you have throttles directly in the intake tract, you have really good response because you don't have this air volume in the plenum that delays your input. Here we are actually controlling it per cycle in the cylinder. So it becomes similar to an electrical engine that from cycle to cycle, we can go from low power to highest power per cylinder at that RPM. Also, not having a throttle means we don't have to draw a vacuum in the intake, which is an energy loss. So we save about 4 or 5% fuel consumption just removing the throttle body, apart from gaining the responsiveness. And then, for example, the 3-cylinder engine in the Gemera, it looks like a tiny little straight 6 because it has 6 exhaust ports and 6 exhaust pipes, 3 of them going to one turbo and 3 of them going to another turbo. So one valve per cylinder to the first turbo and one exhaust valve per cylinder to the other turbo. So at low RPM, when we floor it, we spool up with all the gases we have in the cylinders to the first turbo to make that spin earlier in the RPM range, and then we open up the second exhaust valve. So this means from a 2-liter 3-cylinder engine, we have 600 Newton meters of torque. 400 Newton meters of torque at 1700 RPM and 600 Newton meters of torque at 2200 RPM or something like that, which is just unheard of. Because we can on top of spooling up the turbo, we can have higher compression ratios. We have better fuel air mixture and all these things. So it becomes this small little engine can replace basically a big normally aspirated V8, and but it still fits in any small engine space. So basically replace almost all engines out there in one little package.
In terms of comparing, I don't know, the engine you might find in a Ford Fiesta or something to your engine with the Freevalve technology, how much more efficient is it?
So
overall,
I would say efficiency per size of engine is not a huge difference. It's maybe a few percent leaner, but we have 5 times as much power and torque.
Okay.
So if you compare instead power and torque to efficiency, well, then you have to compare to like a racy 5-liter V8 or something, and then it's huge. Then it's like 30-40%. And emission-wise, even to a small engine, it's probably 50-60% cleaner than a small Fiesta engine, because cold start is 90% of your emissions. As soon as your catalytic converter is warm, basically it's clean air coming out. But before the catalytic converter is warm and the engine is cold, it's all based on how clean you can burn the cold engine. And with Freevalve, we can get much better turbulence and quicker heat up of the combustion chamber than otherwise. So we make those those 20 seconds before the catalytic converter is warm, so much more efficient. It's like 90% cleaner there.
Yeah.
So overall in a test cycle, it's about 50% cleaner. So on top of being more frugal, it's much less emissions, especially in the cold start. And then you can run on any renewable fuel in any climate. So yeah, it's very much, you can be CO neutral and pretty much zero polluting. Not only that, and this doesn't only go for Freevalve engines, but if you have a modern combustion engine that is warm and you're driving in for example, Beijing, where you have a lot of air pollution from coal plants that make electricity for the electrical cars, you're actually an air cleaner because you burn up the particles from the coal plant and it comes less particles out from the exhaust. So if you run on renewable fuel and you have Freevalve and you hardly have any emissions and you clean the air from the coal plant, you actually clean the air from the electrical cars. And I'm not an electrical car opponent. I mean, I really love them and I think that's the future in many, many ways. But it's kind of funny how this kind of old school technology that is not, let's say, well, which is kind of frowned upon nowadays, can have some benefits.
Yeah, no, that's pretty funny. The idea of having like a carbon negative car,
right?
No, it's very cool. So all of this power, this is just a small point, has got to go to the ground at some point, and you're running on Pilot 4Ss with that car. How come you're on them rather than like Cup 2s or Cup 2Rs or something like that?
So in the dimension, the wheel dimension we have right now, there are no Cup 2s or Cup 2R tires. And this is, of course, a little bit more of a family hyper mega car. And I mean, we have like ski racks and roof boxes and so on. And you probably drive them in a little bit more varied climate as well. And I mean, the Cup tires are amazing in the dry, but the 4S is, of course, much faster in the wet.
Yeah.
So, and they are very sporty. I mean, basically, the 4S is the replacement of the old Super Sport tire. And we have four-wheel drive. So we can still do 0 to 60 under 2 seconds with 4S tires.
Yeah.
And it's, but if Michelin would create a Cup tire in that dimension, we would for sure offer it for people living in warmer, not so rainy climates. And further enhance the performance of the car, and we will see. Maybe they will make a tire for us. I don't know yet. But for the time being, it's 4S. It's a very sporty tire. It's not a Cup tire, but as an overall, let's say, varied climate, also rain situation for this type of car, it's a pretty good compromise.
Yeah, imagine driving a car, and any of your cars, to be honest, in the wet or in snowy, slippery. Must be quite interesting.
Well, I mean, we have our test track here in Sweden, and we actually drive our rear-wheel drive 1 megawatt or more powered cars with Cup tires down to plus 10 degrees or so, flat out. And our traction control systems are just amazing. Stability control is out of this world, so the car helps you a lot. But also, having said that, having winter tires on a winter road with a mid-engine car like a Koenigsegg, it's a lot of fun because you have so much control. You sense every little movement. It's basically, if you're on a straight road, you flick the wheel a little bit, you can go sideways for like 30 meters controlled in a straight line and then flick back again. And it's just a lot of fun. Even though you can't really use the power, you can use the balance of the car.
And that feeling of lightness and connected.
And we had a Norwegian customer. He drove his CCX up to Murmansk in Russia in the middle of the winter, minus 30 degrees.
Nice.
So, I mean, they work also in the winter.
It's the best fun driving around in the winter in any car.
It's a lot of fun, absolutely.
Definitely sports cars. Can we move on from the Gemera to the Jesko and the Absolut version? So, can you describe just a little bit of highlight the sort of what that car is or what it's about?
Absolutely. So, absolutely. Yeah. Well, so we made a Jesko, and we saw that the base shape of the car was extremely aerodynamic efficient. I mean, the track-focused Jesko is really doing its best to push the car down into the ground, and when you do that, you add drag. So if you don't do that efficiently, you have a lot of energy lost. So we put in a really slippery base shape of the car, and then started pressing it to the ground to not have too much energy loss. But that also meant that if we focused on a car that doesn't have as much downforce, still plenty. I mean, we're talking several hundred kilos, but remove that massiveness up to a ton of downforce, it became extremely slippery. And with our 9-speed gearbox that we developed for the Jesko, the light-speed transmission, it meant that even without changing gear ratio, the 8th and 9th gears are very, very tall. So we didn't even have to change that to go really, really fast. So we basically took the Jesko shape and optimized it for high speed. Added rakes to increase high-speed stability that surprisingly, when we started developing them, actually also reduced drag because it created some favorable vortexes over the rear to reduce the wake of the car. So we ended up with a drag of CD of 0.278, which is the lowest drag I've heard of any car with these kind of wide tires, big air intakes, having to cool such a big engine. And when we started running the numbers of the power curve of the engine, the transmission, the drag, we said, holy crap, this is going to be really, really fast. So much faster than we, in a way, want to go. But it was kind of low-hanging fruit to create the world's fastest homologated production car ever. And we just couldn't resist it. But at the same time, we said, this is it. It's crazy fast, too fast, and no one should ever drive that faster ever. So this is the last time we do it. And I want to point out really that, I mean, there are a lot of these records floating around, and to us, at least from our perspective, it makes a very big difference if you have a properly homologated road car with emission testing, closed loop crankcase ventilation, diagnosed catalytic converters that need to last over time, crash testing, smart airbags, all of these things, because we spend 80% of our time development budgets on those homologation issues, 20% to develop the performance of the car in comparison. So, for example, when Bugatti did this 300 Plus, it's a rough prototype that is modified, and the real version is much slower. Or if you take these some of these American so-called production cars, they're not homologated at all, so they can just focus on speed, more or less like one of those salt flat racing cars. I mean, then there are much faster cars than these type of cars. So to us, it's important to point out at least that to have a fair game, it should be apples to apples. To go really fast with a vehicle is impressive and it's a big achievement, but please compare apples to apples.
100%. And will we ever see a high-speed run of that sort of speed?
We hope so. Our ambition is to do it. It is, again, about finding a stretch of road and talking to authorities and having all the safety measures in place. And when we're there, not having too much wind or rain or this and that, and it's a big endeavor every time. So you basically, the stars needs to be aligned, and we will push for that and hope that happens, and that's the ambition.
And presumably there just aren't many places on the planet that you can do it.
No, I mean, there are many roads that are potential, but to be allowed to do it is difficult. And the road that we've found in Nevada for the Agera RS, when we took the 277.8 miles per hour record, which still stands today for a homologated production car, I wouldn't say the road was ideal. It was pretty good. It was a little bit indulation, so we really had to go two directions to even out those, and it wasn't very wide. It was fairly smooth, but there was no fencing, so animals could run in and out.
It looked sketchy.
But we were allowed. The authorities allowed us. And that was the main thing. We deemed it as, hopefully safe enough, and did whatever we could to make it as safe as possible, cleaning the road and so on. But for sure, like some stretches of German Autobahn would be even more suitable, or other roads. So it's about finding the right venue from being allowed and weather and climate and everything.
Well, I hope you manage to pull it together. Obviously, it's going to be very, 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 very fast.
Yes.
A lot has evolved since the Agera RS, and that was definitely pretty fast.
let's say, put it like this: it's much more powerful. It has higher RPM range. It has much lower drag, and a taller gear ratio. So yeah, I mean, our simulations tell us it's going to be pretty crazy.
If you redlined it in the top gear, what would that be?
Not being super exact here, but in miles per hour, maybe 330 or something.
Yeah.
Something like that.
So the gearing's there.
Yeah, we don't expect to hit the rev limiter in
Yeah.
ninth.
No.
but somewhere not too far away from it.
Yeah. That would be, I hope it happens at some point, because it's just a mad thing. Do you ever wake up in the morning and just go like, how did we get to this point making these crazy cars?
Yeah, I mean, I get the question quite often. So, did you ever expect Koenigsegg to become what it is today? And I always think about it and said, I kind of didn't expect it not to become whatever.
Yeah.
So any outcome was a possibility. So this was one of them. And of course, working day and night, fighting for something for 20 years, you do that with the hope of a good outcome and that it becomes something. And I was lucky enough or whatever that it worked out, and we're still growing. And that was the potential outcome, and it was the one I hoped for.
Yeah. But what's your favorite part about being who you are, and doing what you do?
I guess the freedom. I have a huge degree of freedom in being allowed to create wild fantasies. I think that's my favorite part.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's like someone comes up. It's not only me coming up with it. Someone comes, maybe we could do this. That's pretty wild. But why don't we turn it up to 11 and just go for it? I can do that.
Yeah, that's so cool. Is this the Freevalve tech going to cross over into? You're going to try and use that in more and more engines going forward?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it will be the basis for Koenigsegg engines going forward.
Yeah.
Secondly, we didn't work 20 years to develop that technology just to have it to ourselves. It wouldn't make sense. Yeah. So we hope there will be some other applications, and we're working with some other companies trying it out. And I think it all depends on legislation, if you're allowed to have combustion engines or not. But there are other areas like trucks, boats, airplanes, where batteries still will, even if you, let's say, optimize the battery technology significantly, it'll still a big compromise for those kind of modes of transportation. And I do, however, like in what we spend energy and time on, I want to have a good consciousness that it's actually good from a bigger picture kind of thing. And there are a lot of new ways of doing renewable fuels in a very good way. And I think there's like waste products that you can ferment and so on that becomes alcohols that maybe rather than just drinking it all, and methanol you should definitely not drink, but just throwing that away or digging it into the ground or something, it's probably worthwhile using it for propulsion as they are CO2 neutral and as we can avoid pollution and as we can have lighter vehicles or whatever. So I think it's kind of a part of the renewable future. And if everyone stares blindly at electrification, we're not seeing the total picture. Something like that.
What sort of, how would you split Koenigsegg as like the tech company versus a car company? Like, is it you predominantly making cars and a bit of tech, or how does that work?
I would say we predominantly make tech that becomes cars. But I mean, we make our own electrical platform, all the circuit boards, all the software, the OTA, cloud communications, apps, brakes, wheels, all of it is in-house developed, and we always kind of have an ambition to see if someone else has an interest in those developments, because it would make sense to make some money on them rather than just for our low volume cars. However, we haven't really been geared as a company to act as a supplier to other companies. We have the tech, but we don't have the organization to support really other companies so well, but we're building on that. So we're a tech company that mostly make our own cars, but that have an ambition to also sell our tech.
Yeah, and I love it because you see with all these companies out there making in the same sort of category, like hypercar type things, most of them, a lot of them, not all of them, don't seem to innovate that much of their own stuff. And that's one of the things I love about what you guys do is like you are constantly coming up with these new things, whether it's a gearbox that's like 40% lighter than the opposite, that sort of thing. And it makes it, as like an enthusiast, like a really appealing thing. It's a really appealing brand. It's one of my favorite brands to follow because you just are pushing this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you get something different and unique from a user perspective and from an emotional perspective. And as you say, most of the other sports car manufacturers are integrators of others' technologies.
Yeah.
They wrap them in their own skin, their own aerodynamics, their own style, their own brand, but they mostly integrate technology from other places. But I would say there is a slight of a trend shift. There's more and more in-house development going on in many of these companies, which I find, makes them more interesting from my perspective. We are extreme. I mean, I think regardless of size of car company, we're the most vertically integrated in the world because who under the same roof, we make our own carbon fiber wheels, brake calipers, electronic controllers, software, upholstery, wiring harness, painting, carbon fiber. You know, it's pretty wild for that.
Yeah, no, it's cool. Right, I'm aware we're sort of running out of time. So normally I wrap these up with 5 questions and I'll see if we can get through them. First question, 5-car garage, unlimited value.
Wow. I wasn't prepared for that one. There's so many cool cars out there, but regardless of value, so I would say, this is really not expensive or unexpensive. I think the Ferrari Dino is very beautiful. I would like to have a Ford GT, the original.
Old one or new one?
I love the new one as well, actually. But I think the original one is more emotional.
Yeah.
I have a Lotus Esprit Turbo, and that was one of my hero cars when I was a kid. I've never driven a Countach, but of course it was on my wall.
Yeah.
And I'll probably be disappointed if I drive it, but I will have one.
And one of your own?
Sorry?
Would you have one of your own?
Yeah. If I'm allowed to say that, I didn't know that there.
You can do.
Yeah. So I'll keep the CCR I have.
Yeah.
And of course, the Regera and the Gemera. Now it's starting to become difficult, of course, because it's like choosing between your kids. Like, of course, a couple of Koenigsegg's on top.
Exactly. Bolted on. If you could only drive one car for the rest of your life, and you're allowed like a £500 Beta on the side.
So I would guess that for many reasons, then that will be the Gemera, because it has the ethos of everything we do at Koenigsegg, and I can bring more friends and family.
Definitely. I rate that. Okay. What do you think is the most undervalued car at the moment?
In the world?
Yeah, in the world.
Undervalued. There are many undervalued cars. I think maybe the late generation, or let's say the last few V12 card engines with manual gearboxes. Some Ferraris like 550s, like the analog, the modern analog cars in general, like where you have all those old school kind of fun features, but modern safety features as well.
Yeah. Those are very appealing to me at the moment. Like whether it's a Aston Martin DBS or 550 or whatever, all that sort of area where there's a crossover of you still have sound system and tech. And
exactly. It's still kind of a modern car, but you have those old school fun things to play around with.
Yeah, totally. Okay, and last question. What is the most interesting car to you at the moment?
To me?
Yeah.
The most interesting car to me at the moment, and I will exclude Koenigsegg's just for the sake of it. I would say what pops into mind is probably the Valkyrie, because it's just so extreme. Not yet sure in my mind if it's really is a road car. If it is, like Adrian Newey says, something you can go grocery shopping with and anyone can drive and this and that, then it's extremely cool. If it's more of just a racing car, well, then it's more just a racing car. So we'll see what it feels like in the end. Apart from that, I mean, Tesla, when it comes to electric cars, they're really, I think, ahead of the game, generally speaking. And I think it's fun how Elon Musk always like, I'm going to do a Model S with 2 seconds to 100 for like 150,000 euro with 1,100 horsepower. It's fun how a big car company, they're a big car company now. I mean, how they're still wild and young at heart and don't give a shit.
Yeah, I love that. And it's funny, I was chatting to some friends yesterday and we were talking about modern stuff. Like someone's getting a 765 LT and we were talking about performance, and two of my mates always have this like battle about whose car's quickest between certain speeds or whatever.
Right.
And we were looking at it and he was talking about something else and 0 to 60 times. And it's like, well, is it faster than a Tesla? And the fact that is even a conversation that you're like a family saloon car or even the Model X or whatever is like 0 to 60 2 point whatever. Like,
and none of the established car brands, high volume car brands, would ever. I mean, they sit in these, let's say, meetings with a lot of decision makers. And, let's make this big SUV do 0 to 100 in 2.5 seconds. Are you nuts? Why would anyone want that? But people want that. So and you need some kind of almost dictator character like Elon Musk to push it through in a big company for it to happen.
And that is the thing with these electric cars. If you've got the motors in there, and you can do the performance, like it's.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very doable.
Yeah, absolutely. We're just a little bit lighter and kind of shorter braking distance and faster cornering on top of that.
And a lot more fun and look a lot
500
cooler.
kilos lighter and twice the power. So,
will we see an all-electric Koenigsegg at some point?
Potentially. As I say, we are powertrain agnostic. Yeah. So if we can conceive a range, performance, endurance, pure electric car that beats our lighter, more complex hybrid or pure combustion engine cars, and we allow ourselves to sacrifice the sound, which we might, then we would.
Yeah.
Totally. If it is a totally more compelling package from a performance perspective, yes.
Yeah.
Do you think right now we don't see that?
Do you think the customers are there for fully electric cars at the moment?
To a certain
in your
degree.
sort of category.
Let's say in this extreme segment, less so than in normal cars, but more and more. And it takes getting used to. I think it has a lot to do with how to differentiate yourself.
Yeah.
Because people are not as aware of V8s, V12. I mean, like they are with V12s, V8s, ECTs, 9-speed, 7-speeds, sounds and all of these things. It's just electric to people. And in many ways, it is more difficult to differentiate. But eventually, I think, yes.
Yeah, I think it will get there because if that's where everything's going.
Yeah, exactly.
That is what it's going to be.
But then coming with something that still roars and spits fire and you're allowed to because it's clean, might stick out a little bit, right?
Totally. That's what I want. I want that naturally, a proper engine. Well, from my point of view, a sound, an experience. Yeah. Driving cars is about the experience. And
transportation we can have in so many other ways, and
exactly.
And sports cars should be about experience, I think.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. It's been great to speak. And
thank you so much.
I wish you luck, and I'm looking forward to what's coming next, whenever that is.
Yeah. Next, I guess, is getting Jesko on the production line next year.
Yeah.
And then the Gemera to follow.
Yeah, totally. Well, thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Cheers.